Check 1 2. Okay, I think we got everybody here now. Okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the City Commission Budget Advisory Board Joint Workshop. I appreciate everybody who's in attendance here today for coming, and we have a lot to talk about this morning. So I'm going to invite Jeff Lowe. Jeff, the chair of the Budget Advisory Board, if you could please come to the podium and please introduce the program.
Sorry, covered it up. Thank you. Okay, good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of the Commission. I want to begin by thanking each of you that took the time out to meet with me to share your thoughts and guidance relating to the fiscal year 25 budget. I shared each of your priorities with the entire BAB, as this was able to assist us during this process. I would also like to thank my fellow BAB members, who some are in attendance today, for all their hard work, dedication during the budget process. I would also like to thank the Budget Office and the City Manager's Office for all the time, direction, and guidance. Since our last meeting, there are a couple business updates. First, the BAB met twice since our last joint meeting to discuss the proposed budget and had related discussions in July and August. Secondly, BAB had several discussions about unfunded community investment plan projects, most recently at our meeting last week. BAB is supportive of developing a plan to address how to fund these general government projects and address the issues such as bridges, sidewalks, and streets. This will likely require a GO bond and/or a dedicated part of the millage rate. BAB will look into this in greater detail after the condition assessments are back. 3 BAB recommendations have been made since the last meeting and with the Commission, and is in part of your funded packages today. BAB unanimously supports the proposed budget as amended for FY25. BAB had several ongoing conversations as it related to the not-for-profits and recommended changes for FY26. In our communications to the City Commission, this is outlined in greater detail. GERS COLA. BAB recommends not doing this in fiscal year 25, instead waiting till next fiscal year to consider the potential increase in the millage rate or sunsetting of the CRA for funding purposes. BAB also had several discussions regarding special events and how to fund them. It was recommended creating a sponsorship committee to work in partnership with the city for some of the larger city-funded events. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to serve in this capacity, and I'll be happy to field any questions that the Commission may have at this point.
Does anyone from the Commission have any questions of Mr. Lowe? I do.
Okay.
The last comment you made with regard to the General Employees Retirement System, the GERS, you said it's the recommendation to perhaps put the consideration over to the next fiscal year because you feel that there would be some funding sources coming from the sunsetting of the CRA that would allow us to pay for that. Do you know approximately how much money the city would be entitled to once the CRA is sunsetted? Has that figure been established yet?
I believe so. About $12 million.
12 million to the city alone?
Correct.
Okay, because I know we've have a lot of ideas for that money, so we'll have to have a separate conversation on that. But I just wanted to get an idea as to what we're talking about. Okay. And also, one of the considerations regarding GERS was either do it in lump sum or over a period of years, correct?
Correct.
And still be able to accomplish the same thing.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And that several years approach was about how much per year? Do you recall? Was it 1 point?
It was more than that. Oh, Laura's got the book.
2.1 to 2.8, depending on.
Okay, so it's in the $2 million
Between
range.
5 to 7 years is 2.1, 2.8.
Okay. All right.
That's correct.
All right, that answers my question. All right, so with regard to your recommendations, let's move on to Budget 2, which is highlights of the presentation. There are, Susan, would you want to go over that with us?
Good afternoon, Susan Grant, Acting City Manager, and we'll go over just some things as far as what has changed since last time, and we have put together a few slides in relation to the GERS decision, and Laura will come up with me and join me at that point. Are you? There you go.
Right here, they're showing it. It's just a 7-second delay.
Okay. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about. Changes to the budget, proposed, talk about fund balance, things that aren't built into the budget, and then we have some slides on the GERS decision. Since our last budget, or since our last meeting, we've gotten the July 1 numbers, and as a result, additional revenue for ad valorem have increased by $1.6 million. Part of that goes to the CRA, and that's reflected in that transfers and operating adjustments on the right-hand side. We were able to refine some state revenue sources based on numbers that we received from the state, and those revenues went down $343,000. And in addition, we're going to be talking at our next meeting of this appropriation of fund balance. We had put some money aside for 2 years of accumulation for upgrading police communications equipment. So that piece of the appropriation of fund balance goes to fund $2.4 million in this year, and then we'll talk about funding an additional $2.4 in the next year. On the expenditure side, you see infrastructure enhancements, primarily two grant matches that we've already talked about fall into that, community programming and some staffing adjustments, and then some transfers and operating adjustments. So overall, the budget remains balanced. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. Here we go. So here you can see what the detail is as far as the two items are the ones that were grant related, and then adding $100,000 for funding the code update for the South Regional Activity Center, and then also a $100,000 add to our traffic calming. Currently, we have about $100,000 a year for traffic calming. We really did feel, based on the feedback we're getting from the commission and the community, that we could use to increase that amount.
Susan, before you move on,
Sure.
regarding the 375 and the Reconnecting Communities grants to with the Broward MPO, if we could just for the conversation identify those particular areas that have been identified for this.
Which streets
Which
are we
streets?
looking at?
Got it.
Let me have my long wind voice. Yes, if you could identify us for us.
Absolutely. Milos is gonna join me.
I mean, are we talking about like Commercial Boulevard, Cypress Creek, or are we talking Sistrunk, are we talking Sunrise?
Good morning, Milos
Or all of
Majstorovic,
them, all the above, yeah.
Acting Director for Cities Transportation and Mobility Department. So the first grant, which is a rail crossing elimination grant, is to conduct improvements at the crossings located on Southwest 22nd, Southwest 17th Street, Southwest 7th Street, Southwest 6th Street, Southeast 5th Street, and Northeast 17th Court. The second one, which has to do with reconnecting communities, would study underpasses at Davie Boulevard, Broward Boulevard, Sistrunk, Andrews Avenue, and Sunrise Boulevard. Yes. So Davie, Broward, Sistrunk, Andrews, and Sunrise.
So my understanding is that this study, being on the MPO, and Warren, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is just to take a stab at what the ramifications would be, the costs, the logistical implications. They just identified these four. It's not limited to those 4 or 5, but it's intended to just start the process. So just like if we're talking about Broward Boulevard, what is it gonna take to do that on the Broward Boulevard? What is it gonna take, to do that at Sunrise? But I think that in our conversations at the MPO, I just want the folks to understand that that is not where it ends. It's going to continue, I mean, it really is gonna continue all the way up to Deerfield Beach, Hillsborough and so forth, because, at each intersection is a major, intersection, and, particularly in Fort Lauderdale, which we advocate to make sure that if, whether it be a bridge or a tunnel, okay, you still need to address those interactions with those major arteries, because the trains are still going to interact with those streets. So, I just want everyone to understand that. That's why we wanted to know what the grant was for, and this is our local match in order to participate in that, federal grant.
Yeah, also, like, to
But
John's
Before,
point.
before, I'm gonna stop you right there, I'm sorry, I apologize. If we're not looking at Oakland Park Boulevard, Commercial Boulevard, and Cypress Creek, I am adamantly opposed to this completely. We're not gonna start and leave District 1 out of this conversation completely at this time, Mayor. That's unacceptable.
Okay, but I don't think we're leaving District 1 out. I think they just identified, these several streets only to see what they can anticipate going further north, all the way up to Deerfield Beach, in order to try to budget for what they anticipate will be underpass programs at all the streets you just mentioned.
Fine, do commercial and leave Broward Boulevard out then.
Well, I'm saying this.
Exactly my point. No, we don't leave any part of the city out of the conversation.
Okay, I'm just saying that the MPO applied for this grant with the federal government, okay, and they brought it back to the MPO to get our permission first to move forward on it, which they did, and then this is to begin the conversation. I understand your
Right, but who
position.
chose,
I'm not
who chose
disagreeing with
those
it.
corridors, Mayor?
I'm not
Who chose them?
I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. Yes, they all have to be addressed, but I'm just saying this is the nature of their grant. It's not our grant, it's their grant.
I'm fine with that. Who chose the streets we were going to be doing this on? Did we? I don't remember voting on that.
No, no.
Did staff do it?
I said the MPO applied for the grant.
They applied for the grant. I'm wondering who chose the east-west corridors.
They
Milos?
chose them. The MPO chose those east-west corridors.
Is that accurate, folks?
So, Ben Rogers, Acting Assistant City Manager. So, just some clarity here. The city and the MPO worked on this grant proposal back in 2023, and it was around the time of the New River Crossing when we were debating the bridge and the tunnel. And this was one of the counter proposals, was that if we move forward with the bridge and did underpasses, it would have maybe a mutual benefit of the tunnel concept. At that time, I want to say it's probably about a year ago from now, I want to say September-ish, we did bring this to commission. We identified those corridors, and they were directly the ones that were impacted with the New River Crossing conversation.
I don't remember us ever, and forgive me if I'm wrong then, I don't remember us ever having a conversation where my district was ignored and left out of the planning. So, just telling you right now, not happy about this.
Yeah, so Commissioner Herbst, we'll review, and if we'll provide you with the CAMs or the information once we have them.
Mr. Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think as we're going through the underpasses, and John, this should be comforting, I think the intent is all along, I mean, Commercial Boulevard, Oakland Park Boulevard, I mean, including in my State Road 84, I think every one of those is going to be identified as underpass. I do not think that it's limited to these at all. I don't know if this is just a feasibility or whatever, but the intent is to have every one of those have is that correct? That was my understanding.
The grant was limited because of the cost. So the MPO had to, along with our city, had to identify, when they made application to the federal government, they had to identify a certain number of them. And because, as Ben has indicated, these were originally chosen because they were part of the bridge tunnel debate. So I remember when we were first talking about doing the bridge, that's when I raised the objection that you can't build a 2-mile bridge through the middle of Fort Lauderdale. So the MPO and the county came back to us with a different proposal, which was to build a shorter bridge, which would allow for there not being a 2-mile long bridge. But I raised the objection, well, you still have the east-west crossings. You still have to prepare for the 80 to 90 or 100 new trains a day that are going to impact traffic going east-west. And that's when they said, okay, we'll talk about Broward, we'll talk about Sistrunk, we'll talk about Sunrise, and it was in that context that those streets were chosen. And then they applied for a certain dollar amount from the federal government. Once we get past this first phase, the dollar amount will increase as they move further north and further south, as they continue the investigation of the east-west intersections in terms of trying to determine how much it would cost to do the underpass. This is not exclusive, it's just the starting point. So I don't want anyone to be misunderstanding that this is the only thing that's going to be examined. This is just a starting point, and we will continue to move forward.
Well, can we ask you a question? Is there an opportunity now for instance, the only north-south is Andrews, all the other ones are east-west. Could we substitute at this particular point, let's say Oakland or Commercial for Andrews or something? Is that something we could do?
We can reach out to the MPO. The grant application identified these corridors, and that was what was approved. So I think it will be challenging for that, but we can definitely investigate if there's ways that we could substitute.
Warren, you can bring that up at the next MPO meeting.
I will.
Okay, we can get you the backup that you
I
need to.
appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here, just a summary of some of the community programming and staffing adjustments. One of the ones you'll see there is something that we've talked about in the past, but we've quantified it, and that is looking at including in our union contracts and for our non-union employees a small amount of paid parental leave. So what we did was costed out what it would be based on historical data, 2 weeks of paid parental leave, and I think it was somewhere in the $100,000 range. So we put that in there as a placeholder, and we will over the next year as contracts come up, look at including that in the various labor agreements.
Susan?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. As you know, I've been advocating for this for like 5 years now, so I'm really happy to see that we're going to take an incremental step towards paid parental leave. So let me ask you this. Do you see in the future maybe actually increasing that amount from 2 weeks to a little bit more? Or, I'm not unhappy that this is at least finally on the table in terms of conversation. That's question number one. Question number two, how does it then affect those that are not represented, that are our employees?
Okay. And the 2 weeks we came up with, we were looking at something, obviously paid parental leave is not cutting edge anymore.
No.
You know, so a lot of our fellow cities already offer it. And I've seen, you know, we've provided, I think, data. Some of them have some kind of a tiered approach. Hey, the first 2 weeks is 100%, the next 2 is 50%, the next 2 is 25%. And again, the idea here is just to dip the toe in, do something that we can afford, and again, that would be subject to negotiation in future contracts as far as expanding that, and looking at the particulars as far as eligibility, et cetera. The second question is, for non-represented employees, we can implement this through a change in personnel PSMs. So administratively do it at that point for the non-represented employees.
Okay, thank you.
You know, we talked about reprioritization of positions to address homelessness. So we moved 2 vacancies from different departments, and we're moving them over to neighbor support. We have no idea, and we'll talk later in the meeting about House Bill 1365, but without knowing what the volume looks like, we do want to be prepared. So we're moving 2 positions to create kind of an administrative team that will deal with complaints and resolving those and documenting the city's response to that. With the new police headquarters opening, we'd like to, because we used to have 24/7 coverage in the lobby. Since we've moved out of the building, we have not been offering that. So we're resurrecting the 24/7 coverage, funded as of September 2025. So it's 1 month of, I believe it's 5 employees that will do that 24-hour coverage in the lobby. We're adding...
How do you get 5 employees for $37,000?
For 1 month. 1
Still?
month, the month of September. Is it
Okay.
5, Laura? Yes,
Okay.
it is 5.
All right.
looking at adding nonprofit funding for our mobile school pantry once a month. Looking at Riverwalk had a amendment to what we would pay there, and additional funding for Early Learning Coalition, and to work on Galt Ocean art events, two different art shows in District 1 at the Galt. One would be during the weekend of the boat show, and I forgot the other weekend, but 2 weekends to have, and it would be through the Howard Allen Events, who does the Las Olas Art Festival, and the cost for the city would just be some of our in-kind services as far as, traffic cones, MOTs, and those kind of things to bring a little activation to the north end of the city.
Susan, the Riverwalk activation funding enhancement, can we get a little bit more detail regarding that?
Now, okay, so do we know that came to us from Riverwalk as part of? Okay, it's just an increase in their costs that they pass along to us through a contract? And we can get you back more information.
Could you an idea what that's, the scope of what that goes for, if I would like that.
So is it electric?
Pam.
Yvette's looking it up, but I think, like I said, they have some hard costs that we reimburse them for. So she'll pull that out and get that for us.
So Riverwalk provides programming, beautification, lighting enhancements, as well as some annual Light Up Lauderdale and Day of the Dead celebration, and the costs associated with those have gone up, so they were asking for some additional funding to support those events and administrative activities.
Does that answer your question?
Okay. Projected fund balance, you'll see here, we've talked about our GFOA minimum is 2 months of fund balance, which is 16% and change. Our, I guess our goal, our target amount is 3 months, which is 25%. What we're looking at, you can see the estimate of where we'll end 2024 and what we're looking at as far as 2025, and that would be about 5.5 million we would project once we adopt this budget. That would be over the 25% target. Just something to keep in mind when you're looking later about the GERS discussion or other capital, discussions. Just good information to have. And then here's some fund balance uses and some recent examples of when fund balance is used. You see the flood event, obviously, grant matches, settlement of collective bargaining agreements, and seawall replacement are some of the more recent examples of use of fund balance. And then items that are not currently built into the budget. If you remember, well, first, there was a project that is still unfunded for Sunrise Lane District streetscapes. It was about $3 million, but the staff is pursuing some other avenues that we might be able to accomplish that at that location. And then if you remember in January, the city staff presented what we called Renew Lauderdale. And that was just a list of different capital or infrastructure needs, such as sidewalks, roadways, resurfacing, bridges, seawalls, that, have a potential maybe for the commission to consider a bond in the future. So we did present that in January, but we plan on dusting that back off and presenting it again in the fall for your consideration. And then finally, the balanced budget that you have right now does not include the GERS funding, but we're going to talk about in the next several slides.
Susan,
well, not this one. Go ahead.
Could we just go back? I'm sorry. I'd like to just talk briefly about the Sunrise Lane District Streetscapes project. So as you know, we had several workshops, huge turnouts actually, and I want to thank Tam for all of that. A lot of community engagement on the Barrier Island for that project. And we had a consultant, we went through all of the steps necessary, lots of input. Everyone came together with a really rousing, happy consensus of what that little corner of the beach should look like. So here's my question. Why do we go through those exercises, and why do we get people so involved and excited, and then we say that it's unfunded? In other words, I think there needs to be a little bit more thought of some sort of continuity, that if we're going to take folks through that kind of an exercise, get people's hopes up, get them engaged, make them put in that time, attend these workshops, that we really should have a little bit more of a concrete plan to make that project come to fruition. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, it does, when we're gonna fund it. And just kind of an order of magnitude, so general fund capital annually is about $20 million. 3 million would be the sum total of what we put away, and I think you all have heard that, for sidewalks and street resurfacing. I think the annual budget on each of those is 1.5, so that would be the equivalent of that project. Again, looking forward to future years, you know, there's some opportunities in relation to the CRA or the millage rate or other revenue sources. You know, we're talking about maybe an EMS district that could free up some money in, you know, the ad valorem and the general fund. So I couldn't agree with you more as far as, yeah, we maybe create an expectation, but, you know, the budget just doesn't have the capacity currently.
So what alternatives are we looking at in terms of that particular project, so I just don't want, you know, projects and designs to just sit on a shelf and get stale. I want to make sure that we're at least making some sort of progress or looking at alternatives to figure out ways to fund these, now that we're at a point where we've done everything else that we can up to this point, with total neighborhood input and support.
So, and I'm going to ask Ben to just say a few words, because he had given me some ideas yesterday.
Before you start, Ben, I mean, Vice Mayor, this is very common, though. I mean, especially in your district, like the 15th Avenue plan, big neighborhood input. Where's the money? Breakers Avenue on the beach, tremendous input for 20 years. Where's the money? It's unfortunately a very frustrating process. So I agree with you 100%, but it's a frustrating process, that's all.
It is frustrating, but there is money, just so you know. I don't want, it's not all doom and gloom, because for those projects that you just mentioned, for breakers, we do have identified and secured about 9 million of that 11, 12 million, so that's pretty good.
Well, look how long it took to get that.
Well, I know, but it's you know, it's a
frustrating.
process.
I'm with you, but it's just
a process,
very frustrating.
you know, to go out there and look at all these options. Definitely. You also mentioned, you know, 15th Street, but that's 15th Avenue, but that's coming to us tonight in budget amendment, I believe, for some funding for that. So we get there. Sometimes we take baby steps. Sometimes it just takes a little longer. But my point with this is, because I did go to every single one of those workshops, huge crowds. They had to get the hotel to bring extra chairs in. It was a really good public process. So that's all. But I hear what you're saying, and I share that frustration. Yes, I'm sorry, Ben.
So Vice Mayor, totally understand the concerns. A lot of times, like I said, we do the planning and then the CIP follows it up, and then it competes for the dollars, right? And as you're aware, we've done a lot of infrastructure improvements over the last couple of years, which have taken some of those funds away. So in this case particularly, one of the outputs from the feedback was that there's a lack of parking in the area. There's a need for additional parking. The Sonesta currently has a parcel in that area. And so we're actively in discussions right now of figuring out how we could maybe come to an agreement or have future development or something that would provide more public parking in that area, and hopefully bundle the streetscape project into a garage or some mega capital project that then could move forward. So there are some alternative approaches going on right now. Too early in the game to give you definitive timelines and information, but we are having conversations.
Okay, no, and that's important, especially, I don't know if you've noticed, but that little strip plaza just to the west is all being demolished right now for that hotel project coming. So this is a good time to really look at Sunrise Lane, because that's Franco and Vinny's, and that whole strip is coming down right now. So that's going to be a really nice redevelopment project right along Sunrise as you approach the Intracoastal Bridge. So this is a perfect time for us to maybe even talk to those folks as well and maybe do something in conjunction with that. But timing is going to be important for this, and hopefully we will get that, because I agree with you, parking is always an issue for any of the sales that go on there. That's always the first thing I hear. We'd love to do this, we'd love to do that, but there's no parking. So if we can work that into it and make that a part of what this is, that'd be great. So thank you.
Listen,
Yeah.
go back, the 20 million a year, that was, what was that for?
So, I mean, what we look at that's allocated for general fund capital, operating capital
it.
on
Okay, I
an
didn't hear-
annual basis
Okay, that's
is
right.
what that is. I was just trying to create kind of an order of magnitude as far as, when we talk about the projects competing for dollars.
Okay.
That's what the pot is.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Okay. Again, just a reminder, when we did talk about Renew Lauderdale, there were roads, sidewalks, bridges, mobility projects, seawalls, et cetera on that. And again, we'll dust that off and bring that back in the fall. And now I'm going to ask Laura to come up and talk a little bit about the GERS request for the COLA. So there are two things at the end that we would ask you for, I guess after Pat makes his presentation from the auditor's perspective, is one, direction on this, and then second is direction on the budget going forward that we can bring to you back in September. So with that, I'm going to ask.
But
Go ahead.
before you move on, I think Milos and Ben, if you could come up, the three of you could answer that. Just a quick question. The slide, go back to the other slide that you had for a moment.
This one?
Right. No, obviously, sidewalks are important, bike lanes, but something, and I'm going to throw this out at my fellow commissioners if they have the same issue. You go through the city and there's not dozens but hundreds of speed humps, and they were there for years, and our neighborhood put speed humps in. I know I've been through Victoria Park, there's tons there, and there's certain spots that really, really need them. Cordova Road, when they redid that, they took the speed humps out and they desperately need them. I heard a quote that the little ones were 2,500, but a speed hump is 80,000 or something of that magnitude, and there's no money for speed humps, but there are hundreds in the city. I mean, am I the only one that's having an issue with speed humps? That's become a rather big priority in my district.
Thank you for your question. So our traffic calming program includes about $100,000 a year, and through tentative budget, now we are doubling that, so it would enable us to advance anything that we have pending. Generally speaking, one cushion is about $3,500 between material and installation, so we are very limited in terms of what we can do with the $100,000 that we used to have. Specifically for Cordova, we have installed speed feedback sign about a week and a half ago, and we're proceeding with another one.
Okay, the cushion is how much? Going through these numbers real quick.
About $3,500 or so.
But that's a little plastic, that little thing. That's not the speed hump per se.
That is the only traffic calming element that we're using at this point, aside of the speed feedback signs.
Okay, but the old speed humps, how much do the speed humps cost?
We haven't installed the asphalt speed humps for a couple of years, but I think that the decision to move from asphalt to rubber speed humps had to do with the cost, number one, and some drainage issues as well. So I believe it's more expensive, and I can get back to you with that number.
I've heard of like 80,000, but the problem is.
No, I don't think it's that.
Okay, but those speed cushions, I mean, the feedback I have, they're not appropriate for some of the major roads. We're like, I mean, for maybe a parking lot, but that might not be the answer. I mean, only 100 to 200,000 a year. That's just a handful. I mean, am I the only one that's having?
Well, you're correct. That only goes so far, and a speed hump is very expensive. But we've had this conversation before, especially in connection with sidewalks, in which I said at some point we all need to figure out, do we want to float a bond to be able to engage in a full-scale citywide project? And that time it was for sidewalks. Here I see $23 million for sidewalks. Then I see $195 million for sidewalks, traffic calming, roundabouts. Those are hefty numbers. And does the $23 million include new sidewalks or just replacing old sidewalks?
So that one is the replacement and repair of existing. When you look at the mobility, that would be the new sidewalk programs.
But that also includes traffic calming.
Correct.
So to answer your question, Warren, it's, we have to decide what we want to do. You know, if we want to agree to borrow the money to connect the various streets and neighborhoods with sidewalks. The city was built with, wasn't built with a lot of sidewalks, so.
Yep. And again, I know it doesn't sound like a lot, but we are, like I said, based on the feedback I've heard from all of you, we doubled that budget from 100 to 200. So hopefully we'll get a few more applications, completed in this year. And again, we'll bring this presentation back and talk about what some priorities are and what we may or may not want to consider bonding.
And also, Warren asked your question, and yes, that is a concern in District 3 as well, pertaining to those traffic calmers, sidewalks as well. It is a conversation that we have often. Neighbors are calling, asking the same question, even having the concerns, the speed hump versus the cushion. So cost is definitely part of that conversation. So, like it's been said, more detail, more conversation.
Yep.
Are you familiar with the speed humps that Wilton Manors put on 15th Avenue?
I am not at the moment, but I can look into
Okay,
those.
I believe the MPO paid for those, and those are like major humps. So I don't know what one of those costs, but I'm not even sure those are appropriate for Cordova, since you brought up Cordova. But so they took everything off of Cordova? I don't remember.
They redid that. They had speed humps for many years. Then they took everything out, and then they put the little bumps there. And
Which are annoying.
Well, for the size and the volume of traffic and the speed and everything, I think those are not appropriate for that road. They're maybe for a road that doesn't cut through.
Right.
But that's a through road, and everybody's cars and alignment was going off kilter. It wasn't the appropriate calming device for that road, so they took it out, and there's nothing there. And there's a school crossing area there, and it's a concern for that road particularly.
Right.
Yeah, so we work with the neighborhood on that particular item after those speed humps were removed, and ultimately we agreed, and this was basically approved by the neighborhood to, in lieu of reinstalling speed cushions, install speed feedback signs. So one is installed, the other one is in the process.
Okay, please proceed.
And again, I'm going to ask Laura to come up and talk to us about just some options as it relates to a COLA for the GERS retirees. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Susan. I'm Laura Reese, Acting Assistant City Manager. My day job is Budget Director. So I'm here to talk to you about one of the items that's going to be important for discussion and direction for inclusion in the fiscal year 2025 budget, because right now, as Susan mentioned, the fiscal year 2025 budget does not have funding allocated to do the requested GERS COLA. If the commission is supportive of it unanimously, we have the options of funding it through 7 or 5 years. In that case, we'd have to build it into our structurally balanced budget, meaning ongoing revenues would have to support it, so we'd need to increase our revenue in the future, or this year, since it's a little late to increase revenues, we'd have to reduce an expense, and we'd have to reduce an expense that's an ongoing expense, so we'll be talking about that. Or if there's a lump sum option of $12.5 million, we would need to identify how we would fund that in a lump sum manner. Using one-time revenues is appropriate in that case. And, Susan talked about fund balance. That was an important part of the general fund conversation for this. So we talked about at the July meeting, general employees' retirement system is a closed system, but the employees that continue to be in that system work in a variety of different funds or a variety of different departments. So, for example, Public Works Department has general employees, retirement system employees that work in the Stormwater Fund and that work in Water Sewer Fund. We have folks in the Police Department that are funded through the General Fund, or the Parks Department that are funded in the General Fund. That's why this looks a little complicated, because it's showing the allocation by fund based upon where folks who are active in the system work. So we have shared with you two possibilities. If there isn't a unanimous vote, we would need to fund it through one-time lump sum payment. And the general Employees Retirement System provided you at the last meeting with a list of projects to consider to use for funding this expense. Staff reviewed the projects, and staff was not supportive of recommending to abandon those projects. So for example, in the general fund, the largest project that was recommended on that list was the Riverwalk Seawall project. And even though the cash won't be spent this year, that's not a project that staff recommends abandoning. So we did take a look at that list that was provided, and we didn't move that forward as part of this process. So what staff recommends, if you would like to fund using the one-time payout, we recommend in the general fund using fund balance to the tune of $6.2 million. And if you choose to go in this direction, we would say, you know, it would bring us a little bit below our 3-month target, but and it could impact our bond ratings, but that would be the easiest way without abandoning important projects that are on the table for this year.
What are those numbers when you say a little bit below?
Okay,
What are we,
yep,
what are we talking about?
So that, I'm gonna go way back to Susan's. So we right now are projecting that we're $5.5 million over our general fund target. So the number we're comparing that to is 6.1. So it would take us around $1 million below where our target is. But when we talk about budget discussions, it's really just competing priorities. So that's why we shared the capital project needs, because typically if we have extra one-time funding that's above our target, we would recommend that to be used for one-time needs, such as capital projects. But if this was the direction we were provided, we would recommend general fund utilizing fund balance, and water sewer fund is really below its target for fund balance, and we really couldn't recommend dipping into fund balance anymore. So in order to fund a one-time payment, we would recommend delaying the comprehensive water and sewer plan update for a future year. We do think that's an important plan, but that's, if we needed to come up with the money, that's how we would recommend moving forward. And for stormwater fund, we would again take fund balance, but the impact would be fewer neighborhood level projects that we'd be able to complete. Any questions on that? And ongoing, again, the second part of that is if we were to fund the 5 or 7 year allocation, we would have to reduce something that's ongoing in nature. We do have capital projects that are ongoing in nature. Each year we put money aside for facility assessment needs, so for new roofs on facilities, air conditioning systems, things like that. And so we would say for the general fund, if you were going to fund that over multi-years, we would reduce that project as in addition to your sidewalks and your streets, because that would allow us to, without impacting programming, reduce capital slightly in each of those categories in order to fund the general fund contribution. And then in water sewer fund, we would recommend just doing a little less of your I&I, which is an ongoing project, in order to move that forward. In stormwater, again, it would just be fewer neighborhood level projects. And I think that's what you asked for when you asked us to come up with how we would do it, and I'm open for any questions.
Okay, anyone have any?
I have a question,
Oh, go ahead,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yep.
Water and storm sewer fund and stormwater fund. What came up next as a possibility? What was the second option other than using water, sewer, stormwater? Was there another that you played with to get to this being the best?
Are you talking about in terms of expenditures? So a lot of the costs.
I think what she's
What
asking
I'm
is, why are
asking
we
is,
dipping into
why are we
those
using
funds to
those
pay
funds?
for the GERS? I think it's because those people worked in those departments, so.
I understand that,
yeah.
but also how it's gonna affect those neighborhoods. There was no other, is there another opportunity than those two particular funds? Because I don't feel comfortable, saying we're now going to again delay giving stormwater projects completion, addressing, water and sewer issues.
Yep. So this is based on how we currently allocate the expense based on where the employees reside, right? We always have the option, if you give us direction, to take more of it from the general fund. So if it doesn't come out of stormwater or water and sewer as an example, that would be more that would have to come out of either general fund, fund balance if we were doing a lump sum, or ongoing, operating capital expenditures in the general fund. So general fund is always an option.
Right.
However, it would make the burden on the general fund, that much more. Because if you look at, just on the 7-year, it adds, $500,000 plus, where's stormwater, about 600,000 to the million, 065 that's there. And then on the lump sum basis, where'd the lump sum go?
I thought it was explained.
Yeah, on the lump sum, you'd be talking about 10 million, that would have to come from general fund versus the 6.
But I thought it was explained to me that it had to come out of those enterprise funds because that's where those employees worked.
So that's where the employees work, and that's how we currently allocate it. But we always have the option to use general fund dollars because those are the ones that have no restrictions attached to them.
All right.
Yeah, there's never a must, there's only a shall, may kind of question. So we may take it out of the general fund, we may take it out of the enterprise funds. It's preferable to take it out of the enterprise funds so that all the costs associated with the operations are built into our rates, but it's not mandatory that we do that.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, there being none, thank you. So, business 3.
I'm sorry, Mayor. Are you gonna ask for direction later? Because we need to know whether or not to build this into the budget, or is that gonna be, this is the only time we're bringing this
All right,
to you?
so the Budget Advisory Board has recommended that we defer the issue until the next fiscal year. So, did you want to say something, Bill?
Thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the Commission. Bill Brown, member of the Budget Advisory Board. First of all, let me say, Chairman Lowe brought this up, and yes, the board was very unanimous about deferring this. We took a lot of time, a lot of discussion, and we want to let the retired employees for the city know that we are very appreciative of their past performance for the years of service. However, when we got into this and we started looking seriously at hitting the water sewer fund, the stormwater funds, and the different funds with the capital improvement projects that's facing this community, the infrastructure, and having to go out possibly in future with the GEO bond to cover some of those expenses, we felt it was not prudent to tap in to these enterprise funds where the money could be used for, as you mentioned, Commissioner Pittman, that would probably affect some of the neighborhoods. So that's why we felt that we just couldn't absorb it in this year's budget to do that. To hit 12 million out of the reserve fund for a 3-month, when we're looking at, hurricane season and operating this city for 3 months, if we took a hit like Fort Myers has now had 2 hits in 2 years, it's going to be a very substantial financial burden on this community. So that's why we felt it would be best to defer it. And we also have some other issues facing it. Yes, we've not had ad valorem rates increase now going for, if this budget's been approved for 18 years. We've always lived on the fact that we've seen an increase in the assessed values. Yes, we have new projects coming online the next 2-3 years, but we're also seeing, especially in Fort Lauderdale, the older condo buildings dropping the value of those buildings on sales of up to 40%. And that's going to have a long-term effect for the next 2, 3, 5 years on assessed values just for Fort Lauderdale, because we have a lot of older condo buildings that are 25 to 40 years old. Thank you.
Could I add a thought to that? So we talk often about the need to have the reserve fund in case of a hurricane. But every time we have a hurricane, FEMA declares an emergency, and we immediately appropriate all the funds, and then the state usually steps up. We usually wind up getting reimbursed almost 100% for every hurricane that we have ever had. There's been very limited amounts of funds that the city has actually had to put up in relation to hurricanes. So I don't want anybody to think that if we don't have this money in reserves and a hurricane hits us, that we are going to be going broke. It doesn't work that way. We also have more than sufficient cash on hand. So just so we understand, there's two things that we need to focus on financially with respect to government operations. One is an appropriation, which is a legal authority to spend money. We don't have to have the cash on hand. In fact, we typically don't. We adopt the budget in advance of all the revenue that we're going to get for next year. It is legal authority for staff to go ahead and spend money. That's what an appropriation is. That's separate and distinct from having cash on hand to go and cut a check. That's done out of what's called a pooled cash account. All of our cash goes into one big pooled cash account, and in our general ledger, we allocate it amongst the various funds. We have probably at any given point somewhere between 800 million, roughly, of cash sitting in the bank. We're not going to run out of cash. What we talk about is a legal authority to spend. As soon as there's a federal declaration, we do an appropriation, and we now have that legal authority to spend money that we know we're going to receive from the federal government at some point in time. So let's be sure that we understand what we're talking about here.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. Pat, you want to give your presentation?
Yes. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Commissioners. The City Auditor's Office has performed a review of the fiscal year 24-25 proposed budget. The budget is compiled by the City Manager and is pursuant to Section 4.09 of the City Charter. We had several objectives for our review of the fiscal year 25 proposed budget. The primary focus of our review was to ensure that the budget is balanced, revenue and expenditures estimates are reasonable and materially correct, and that the proposed millage rate is in compliance with Florida statutes. The methodology of our review consists of the following. The City Auditor's Office performed various analytical procedures, reviewed budget support worksheets, and made inquiries to OMB as needed. Additionally, our office compared the line item detail from proposed budget to the projections of actual expenditures through September 2024. Furthermore, the CAO analyzed trends and variances of 3 prior year fiscal years' budget versus the actual to gain a historical perspective to identify opportunities to improve the accuracy and revenue estimates. The documents reviewed included budget message, the executive summary, including supporting tables and schedules, as well as revenue and expenditure detail reports from the city software system. Finally, as part of our audit work, the CAO attended all budget meetings and any relevant meetings as they related to the development of the new budget. This participation provided further insight into potential future operating conditions and budget requests. By coordinating with staff during the preparation of the budget, rather than after its presentations to the City Commission, the CAO continues to implement a continuous audit approach. Our office conclusion is that the fiscal year 25 proposed budget of the City of Fort Lauderdale is considered a balanced budget as presented. The areas of concern section in our report, which is not all inclusive, but currently represents the CAO's deemed important enough to be brought to the attention of the City Commission. The concerns are related to ongoing events and may impact the budget and city resources going forward. In addition, the priorities established in the Commission's annual action plan all show funding allocations in the coming year, and the proposed millage rate is in compliance with Florida statutes. We have 3 areas of concern. The areas are items that do not impact our overall conclusion, however, bear consideration for both the proposed and future years. Number 1, enterprise resource planning. Upgrades and updates are a normal part of the information technology operations, and even though ERP funding seems appropriately budgeted, the CAO believes there's still an area of concern as there are associated costs enhancing other software applications that work in conjunction with ERP. These upgrade enhancements are not budgeted within ERP, but instead are budgeted in other areas, therefore not providing the consolidated true cost of the ERP implementation. For example, more employees had been hired full-time to address ERP concerns and implementation issues, with further adds to the overall cost. Continued issues with payroll module remain, including but not limited vacation and sick time tracking and accrual accuracy. Other shortcomings included the delay in the production of the financial statements for external audits. Number two, overtime. The CAO notes a significant amount of city funds being allocated to overtime. In our review, overtime is consistently understated when compared to the actual overtime incurred. To fill the actual overtime expense, what seems to be occurring is that the budget vacancies, which are funded, unfulfilled positions, have been relatively unchanged over the years, are being used to pay for the increase in overtime. The overtime budget numbers should more accurately reflect what is needed. Number three, community investment plan. Regarding all construction projects in the CIP, it should be noted that the continued increased inflation will have an impact on the cost of materials and labor. As the city proceeds with the current and new projects, the potential increase is difficult to quantify. However, it should strongly consider as a high likelihood of occurring. Therefore, if current projects are delayed and there is new projects starting, this could potentially have a significant impact on resources. Some examples include park renovations, the water treatment plant, and associated city enabling work related to the water treatment plant. Lastly, I'd like to recognize the Office of Management and Budget for assisting us in providing budget information and supporting documentation. Thank you, Laura Reese and Yvette Matthews and your staff. And I also would like to recognize our audit staff that did a great job in reviewing the fiscal year proposed budget. At this point, if there's any questions, I'd like to address them.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Anyone have any questions to Mr. Riley? Okay, there being none, thank you so much, we appreciate it. Okay. So back to Laura's question as to what we want to do with the GERS matter. Do we want to accept the recommendation of the Budget Advisory Board, or does the Commission want to consider action on this? We don't have to make a decision today, but I understand we have until September to make that decision. Is that correct, Laura?
Hi, Mayor. Any changes you'd like incorporated in the tentative budget that you'll be voting on September 3rd, we would need that direction today. If it's not incorporated in the tentative budget, we would ask that you not make any, you could let us know about changes in September 3rd, but that you not make any changes on September 3rd because it disrupts our advertising ability with the Sun Sentinel. So we ask that any changes be made at the second public hearing, so either now or on September 12th.
Okay. All right.
And Mayor, just to add, because I know we had talked about if there's not a unanimous vote, but a 3-2 vote would be a no-go. So it would have to be unanimous to fund over the 5 or 7 years, or a 4-1 to fund a lump sum. Just
Okay.
FYI as far as, what direction is going
Okay,
forward.
so
Is that brought as in conference, or that's brought as in the evening, as an actual roll call vote?
So if you would give us direction, we could bring an item at September for you to vote on, or what happened in previous years, during this workshop, you gave us direction through consensus to either proceed or not proceed.
And Mayor, I think that's the rub, because we've had this discussion on the dais already, and it has always sort of fallen, the last couple of times we've had this discussion, it's been a 4-1 vote in terms of this COLA. I can't support, at a 4-1 vote, I cannot support a lump sum. I just think that that's too much of a hit. I could support, because I do think that we have the availability to do that if we were unanimous and spread this out over 7 years. I think that's very doable. But I just can't see how we could go forward with a one lump sum of over $12 million for this. And I have always supported this COLA every year this has come up. But I just don't see, if we're not unanimous, how we do that. It's a difficult number. It's just really high. I think that other priorities that we've seen, I'm not in favor of doing anything to any way take away from anything to do with water, stormwater, or sewer. For me, infrastructure will always continue to be the number one priority moving forward. I even think that that takes precedent over the discussion we had about sidewalks. Sidewalks are important, but not as important as seawalls and bridges and our other infrastructure needs. So that's how I feel on this. So Mayor, I guess it would really be up to you because you're the one who has not gone with the other four in terms of supporting the COLA. If you still feel that way, I just don't know how we're able to go forward with a lump sum for 1 year. That's just my honest assessment. As I don't know how everybody else feels, but that's how I'm looking at this now.
Could we have the, what was your title? What?
Wait a minute, we can't hear you, so if you're gonna ask questions of anybody in the audience, they have to come
Right, could
up
you
to the
please-
podium.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna ask her to come up. Could you, you've presented before us before. I do thank you, and you've heard the discussion. I'd like you to your thoughts.
And I am actually the chairman of the General Employees Retirement System, as well as the executive director of Police and Fire. And one of the reasons I was here is, I guess a question had come up, is if you grant this to general employees, would this affect police and fire? And it would not. Because unfortunately, both plans have hurdles they have to meet to even be able to recommend to the city commission a COLA. Police and fire is not even anywhere near that, unfortunately, so it would only be general employees. And our general employees basically have not had a COLA since 2001. I mean, the wages, the cost of living, as we know in South Florida, has gone crazy. So, and every year we have to reach those hurdles, and we've been fortunate enough to have done really well in our plan to be able to come to the commission to ask for this. We just did a couple little notes here. We have over 42% of our retirees make less than $2,000 a month. And we talk about the homeless people here and all the other things. I mean, our own people that actually still live in the city are almost on the poverty level. It's really sad for us. So that's basically, we would ask that you grant this, whether it's over a one time or over 7 years, and we're only asking for it for one time. We haven't been here since 2000, well, we came a couple years ago, and it was also told to come back a couple years, and now we're here again because we have reached those hurdles. We've had the returns that are required. We've exceeded our assumed actual rate of return every year for at least 5 years, which is why we're able to come here. So we would definitely ask that you go ahead and grant this for this year.
Okay.
2001.
2001.
23 years, okay.
Yes.
I'm still on that space about, my concerns with the funds, including the storm, water fund, and the water and sewer. At this point, is there no way to look at another?
Yeah, well, I think what's being said here is that we could take the whole amount, like if we did it over where's the 7-year slide?
Yeah. It's
Okay,
on the-
if we did 2.152 million, if we took it out of the fund balance, we have like a $5 million cushion this year that would allow us to just take the whole thing out of the fund balance over the next 7 years, rather than compromise those other funds. So we don't have to take it out of the stormwater fund. We don't have to take it out of any of the other funds. We could just take it out of the general fund, I think is what's being said here. So there is that opportunity to avoid. I agree with you. Every nickel and dime we can put towards stormwater and infrastructure is wherever we can find it. So I would object along with you that that's not the place to find it. So if we did take it out, it would still allow us not to compromise our bond rating, because we would still be at the 3-month level if we took 2.152 out to pay for this retirement upgrade, right? This COLA.
So Mayor, if we had done it over the 5 or 7 years, we would take that out of annual operating budget versus the fund balance.
Oh, we have the ability to do that?
Yeah, that would come out of operations.
Yeah, but we don't want to compromise any of these other programs.
So we could do out of operations in the general fund, but again, we talked about, 20 million a year is what we have for operating capital in the general fund. So that would reduce that for those things like we pay for the sidewalks or the roadway
Right, but we don't want to
resurfacing.
compromise that. We could take it out of the fund balance and not compromise any of those programs.
So you're suggesting that we do the 7-year program, but take it out of fund balance annually?
Right, because we have that ability to take it out of the fund balance without compromising the 3-month level that we've been consistently following, correct?
There is that ability. Now, best practice would tell you that excess fund balance should be used for one-time expenditures versus the kind that would be annually, or in this case, over a 5-year or 7-year period.
This is kind of a hybrid, though. So
Yeah,
this really
it
is a one-time expense. We're just spreading it over 7 years.
Yep.
This is a one-time incurrence. The only thing we're really talking about here is, are we funding it all at once? Are we funding it over 5 years? We're funding it over 7 years. To the mayor's point, if we fund it over 7 years, it's still a one-time expense. We're just spreading it out over a couple of years. This is not an ongoing, recurring.
Correct.
Like salary increases would be.
Yeah, you're right. It is a hybrid from that perspective.
Right. This is a little unusual.
So, you could take the 2.1 out of fund balance annually. Right now, we're saying we're gonna be 5.5 over. So assuming that that doesn't increase or decrease, you'd wind up, going below our threshold by year 3 or 4.
Right,
But
but I
again,
mean-
typically, we're very conservative in our budgeting, and we do wind up adding to fund balance.
So hypothetically, what if we don't have that cushion next year in the fund balance? Would we still be obligated to pay the 2.152?
Yes, once we bring to you an ordinance adopting this, I don't know if it's an ordinance or a resolution, but once we bring it, the COLA will be paid, and it would be incorporated into the annual actuarial report for the fund. That would be an amount we'd be obliged to fund.
Commissioner, you want to say something?
In regards to the recommendation that BAP has given us.
Right.
Okay, if we could kind of look at a different type of scenario, because they were recommending, BAP, I'm sorry, if you could come back to the podium, I'm sorry. With the recommendation that you've given saying not to fund this, COLA this particular fiscal year.
That's correct.
With us going in the direction, if we go in the direction of the 5 or 7 year, with those suggestions of going forward for 2026, you said something about you said millage rate and some other revenue?
Correct. If there had been an increase in millage rate, et cetera, that could possibly occur next budget cycle, then we would look at this differently. But currently, for the budget cycle, currently that we looked at, we did not feel it was appropriate at this time to have this expense.
Jeff, do you think, given our 18-year track record of not raising the millage rate, that it's likely we would raise the millage rate next year just to do this?
Yeah, that would be,
I can't answer that one.
And I'm saying that somewhat sardonically. I don't see any scenario in which the commission would entertain a millage rate simply for this thing. I think we have tried long and hard. I appreciate the perspective of the Budget Advisory Board on this one, but as we know, sometimes the elected officials and the advisory boards are not always on the same path. This is one time I would say that, given the long track record of
18 years.
Well, 18 years, but moreover, I can say this: when I was the auditor, I actually spoke out against one of the millage rate increases. I'm sorry, the COLA requests, and I did that because they had only exceeded their target thresholds for 1 year. And, my thought at the time was we need a little bit more of a track record of exceeding the thresholds before I would feel comfortable making that recommendation to the commission. I think you said, Lynn, how many now, 6 years that we've been exceeding the thresholds? Yeah.
We're required to have 5, and I know we've had 2 more.
Right. So I think based on that, I'm comfortable doing it. I will candidly tell you, I don't think if it doesn't happen this year, it's probably not going to happen. So, Mayor, you are the swing vote on this one. Hate to put you in that position, but that's how it seems to have worked out.
The reason why I wasn't comfortable with it the first time is because we didn't know the funding sources, and we're now much closer in our budget cycle to be able to figure out where we stand. So now we're getting better information, more precise information, And I believe there might be an opportunity here at the 7-year program to be able to use the fund balance to pay for it without compromising our credit rating or any of the other programs that we already have in place, including our infrastructure programs, that include not just water and sewer and stormwater, but the sidewalks and speed bumps and all that. That should stay in place if everyone's in agreement with that.
Sounds like we have a consensus.
Okay, I would like to make a statement if I can.
Make a statement.
Well, weigh in, if you will.
Okay.
Guys, let's be real. We don't sell tires. We don't sell big screen TVs. We're in a service business. Our employees are, for lack of a better term, our product, our cost of goods sold. They are, it's an expense we must meet. 23 years, 2001. I mean, this is beyond ridiculous. We talk about the budget. The budget is really a false budget because we are not giving them the cost of living that should have been built in from years ago. So this number is a little bit false, and we're just bringing this back into reality. This does affect, it shows how we treat our employees. It affects our ability to hire new people in the future. I think we have a moral obligation for people that have worked for our city and given their heart and soul here to treat them well after they leave here. I would be in favor of, one way or another, granting this request. I would like to do it over 7 years, but one way or another, this is an obligation that we do have, and by pretending it's not there, it doesn't mean that we're doing the right thing. Either way, I would approve going. I'd rather 7 years, obviously, but I do strongly feel that we need to meet this obligation. It's our obligation.
All right, anyone else have any comments? So, I would support the 7-year amortized approach to this, provided it comes only out of the fund balance and does not in any way cannibalize any of these other funds that we have or any of the programs that we've already put in place. Does that make sense?
Yep, and we have your direction, and we'll make some adjustments going forward and bring back whatever is appropriate. I don't know if it's a resolution or an ordinance, but we'll work on that for the September meetings.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All the retired, well appreciated.
All right, thank you. Okay, is there any further business of the Budget Advisory Board? There being none, Mr. Lowe, thank you so much. Mr. Brown, everybody, all of you gentlemen, thank you so much for being here today, and everyone else on the committee, thank you for all the hard work that you put into this. We know that it is not an easy task, and I see that your mentor, Mr. Donaldson, is sitting in the audience there, watching over everything we say and do. Anyway, Madam City Manager, any further business of this meeting?
Nope.
Okay.
We'll see everyone
This
at
workshop is
1:30.
now concluded.